And away we go.
And now, the moment you've all been waiting for, the one, the only, the Bradley Hall. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to welcome you to today's edition of the Bradley Hall Show. And I am your host, the Bradley Hall. Okay, I want to share something with you that I am really excited about. My new course, The Role of Meditation in Holistic Healing, is available now. In this course, I explore more about the history of meditation as well as the proven healing properties and benefits of meditation. I share with you various medical and scientific studies and experiments that are corroborating what gurus and mystics have known for thousands of years, that meditation is actually an integral part of holistic healing. Plus, for a limited time, I have thrown in 10 free guided meditations at the end of the course. So don't delay. Let's get started on your healing journey now. Go to www.lifeintruthacademy.com to register. Hi, welcome back to another episode of the Bradley Hall Show. I'm your host, the Bradley Hall. My guest today is a friend of mine, Paul Christino. Paul is also a trauma recovery coach. He's joining us today to talk about his personal story and several different subjects that relate to trauma recovery and PTSD. And really looking forward to having him today. So, welcome, Paul.
Hey, Bradley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. Glad to be here. Glad to see your face. Glad to talk to you, man.
Yeah, same here. I've really been looking forward to it. So,
Me too.
all right. So I've gone through your bio.
Yeah.
And this May is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm really excited to have you here because you and I have something in common. We're both trauma recovery coaches. Mm-hmm. And so it's been the theme of the month. And we'd like to, I'm happy to have you on to talk a little bit about trauma recovery.
For sure. I'm open.
Good. Okay. Well, you want to start? Just tell us a little bit about your story, whatever you want us to know. Just kind of start there, and I'll just pick up.
For sure. Well, it's funny, Bradley, because this is what I do. This is what we do for a living. So we hear people's stories every day, all day long, and we encourage people to tell their stories. But honestly, man, I think the hardest thing in my recovery is telling my story. That's one of the hardest things for me. And I think agree. It's, you know what I mean? And especially for for men.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel reluctant to put a lot of details out there because there is always this stigma that if you are speaking about your trauma and your experiences, then there's a weakness that comes along with that.
That's right.
And you know what it's like, man. So it's funny when people tell me to tell them my story, it always gets here and then never gets out of my mouth because, it's just tough for me.
Yeah.
But I will say this, I don't think people could do this type of work that we do if they haven't really been there themselves.
Yeah, that's a great point. Bobby and I were talking about that last week, and I don't want to say anything negative about what anyone does at all.
For sure.
But I think it's definitely an advantage to be a trauma recovery coach and have the experience of going through the trauma.
For sure.
And depending on everyone's situation is different, but the dark times and the mental battles through whether it's depression or whatever the case may be. And I agree with you. I mean, that is a huge asset. And everyone's story is different, but to have someone who has been through the terrain is definitely a benefit.
And for me, it's if I was on the other end of that, if I was sitting on the opposite side and I was talking to a therapist, and I have, I want to know that that person that I'm talking to has been there and they've survived it. I can't,
Right.
if, because you deal with trauma victims are, they're right at the edge.
Yeah.
They're right at the edge of falling off.
Yeah.
And I need to know that your knowledge doesn't just come from a textbook.
Yeah.
I need to
Yeah.
know
And
that. I need to know that in here.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I don't know about your story because I'm
Yeah.
just learning all this
Yeah.
firsthand. But in my situation, I was seeking therapy. I mean,
Mhm.
I had my my life had just come apart at the seams.
Mhm.
That breaking point
Yeah.
but before that, I recognized that there was a pattern happening,
Mhm.
and I tried to find a counselor. I tried to find a therapist, and I went through them just one after the other. I couldn't find one that I could connect with that seemed like they were
Sure.
genuine. Not that they weren't genuine, not that they didn't care. Just seemed like they had that missing piece.
Absolutely.
And I finally found one, and everything changed from that moment when I connected with her. I knew that she knew. I knew she'd been through it. I knew we were having legitimate conversations. She's going to hold me accountable. And after I've been through 4 or 5, have you experienced something
Of
similar?
course, man. I mean, you go through these cold fish therapists, and they're sitting across from you, and there's that blank, dead look,
Yeah,
and I'm thinking, listen, I could tell they're extremely intelligent. I
yeah,
can tell they're articulate. I can tell they want me to be better. But I can also tell that there are times, Bradley, when I would talk about certain things in my life, and the reaction I would get were two things. Sometimes a person would sit there and almost like if they had some popcorn and they just listened to my story because it was so compelling. You know what I mean?
right, right, yeah,
Like, holy shit, this is a movie. And then other times you get the complete, like, I can't relate to this
yeah,
look, you know?
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's tough when you're dumping the heaviest stuff on somebody and you could see that they just don't know what to do with it.
That's right. And
That's a
even
tough
even
thing.
even some of the sound advice I got, I could just tell that I don't know. I mean, it was genuine. They knew what they were talking about, but it
Sure.
was just taking advice from someone that I knew they hadn't been there. And
Right.
even the therapist that I did connect with, I don't believe she has I don't know this, but I never believed she had a full traumatic background, but I knew that she got it.
Mhm.
And I think I want to make that the key point here is whether your coach or your therapist has been through trauma or
Mhm.
hasn't been through trauma, that they understand that they're informed. They know that it's a
Sure.
different set of rules, it's a different set of circumstances, and
Absolutely.
those circumstances and rules are very, very, very important.
For sure. They're important because you're dealing with, like we said, you're dealing with a person who's in a real touchy situation.
Yeah,
Like you said, we all go through these things, but when you reach the apex of that and you're like balancing with one toe on the top of it and you can go either way. Like we said, I just need to know that that person has been there. I just need to.
yeah,
And I said, when we got into this, I was saying, my clients are going to know whether
yeah,
I put my whole story out there on the internet, my clients are going to know who I am, why I am, from whence I came, and from where I came.
right,
They're going to
yeah,
know that.
yeah. I agree with that
Hmm.
completely. And
Gonna have to.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's extreme. It's
Hmm.
critical
It's
for sure.
critical. It definitely is. It definitely is. Yeah, man. But I just, it's funny, man, because I see, you know, trauma's a tricky thing. And I know for me, there was a long time where I felt as if, I have this under control,
Yeah,
becoming extremely comfortable in the discomfort. And I challenge anybody out there who's listening to this today to just become a little bit aware, become aware of yourself, and see if you can recognize the fact that most trauma survivors have put themselves in a position of, I'm just resigned, and I know I will never be completely whole. I know I will never be completely happy. I know I will never be completely calm. So they become very comfortable in this state of disarray. And I know that I would say the majority of people out there are in that state. You know, we're so uncomfortable. We just don't know what to do about it, so we accept it. And
But and if I
yeah,
could go back to something you said at the very
yeah,
beginning, to tie that in,
yeah,
I think I think that really comes with you mentioned about it being hard to tell your story.
yeah, man.
And I think what happens is that our brains want to polarize things. It's the left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and it becomes either or. We see that, especially now with
Hmm.
politics.
Hmm.
Things are so polarized,
Sure.
and I think that we get caught up in, if I talk about it, I show weakness, like you said.
Right.
That weakness comes into playing the victim, right? Like, if, I don't want people to think that I'm whiny, that I'm
Absolutely.
weak, and they can't understand because they're not going through, which is also somewhat of a fallacy. Everyone's
Hmm.
fighting a battle you can't see
For
because we
sure.
all do this. We all hide it. So you think, well, I'll just keep it quiet and I'll deal with it myself.
Mm.
And you have to correct me if this is different for you, but in my
Sure.
situation, I continually try to keep it to myself, continue to try to keep quiet, continually try to be the shiny object on the outside.
Sure.
I even tried to be uh, intentionally tried to be a larger shiny object,
For sure.
get on social media and was projecting, how happy I truly am,
Yeah.
despite going through, the things I was going through. But just let's be quiet. Let's kind of go about ourselves amongst ourselves, but not telling my story was inhibiting my progress. I could only make so much progress by myself. It didn't matter how much I read, how many cool people I talked to, the knowledgeable people I talked to, how much I journaled, how much I matured. It didn't matter. It
Hmm.
wasn't until I started telling my story recently that I started growing by leaps and bounds. And I've done a lot of growing in the last 15 years,
Sure.
but I noticed I started being more open and incrementally telling a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and I saw this growth really start to happen. Where about a year or two ago,
Hmm.
I just started. I didn't care anymore. I just started and the more I tell it, the more normalized it became, and it wasn't as difficult to tell. And now it's a complete evolution in the last year or two. Have you found that same
Brother.
same thing with the more you tell it, the easier it is to tell?
So much, yeah. And I always, my wife is always behind me, encouraging me to talk about it,
Which is critical. That's huge.
which is super critical,
Yeah.
because I found that also too. You you tell your story, a little bit of that shame seems to dissipate.
Yeah.
And it's the shame that comes along with appearing vulnerable. And I understand what it is. I understand exactly what it is. I mean, you mentioned for 15 years you were going through you were keeping that. That's a long time, man. That's a
Yeah.
long
And
time to keep
actually,
things.
and that's not the full truth. I
Probably
mean,
longer
not
than
that
that.
I'm not telling you the truth, but
Right.
15 years ago is when I realized I needed to do something differently, and
Okay.
I began the work 15 years ago.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so I think we have this. I don't want to put words in your mouth
Go, yeah.
because I don't know your story
Hmm.
completely, but I think I know a little bit of it. I suffered sexual abuse as a child.
Hmm.
Do we have that in common?
Hmm.
Okay. Okay. So around the age between 4 and 7, the first time,
Hmm.
and then 11 to 13 the second time,
Hmm.
and that's what I was dealing with, and the monumental mistakes that went along with that, with the side effects and the things. And it wasn't until my early 30s when it was all catching up to me and things completely came unraveled, and I knew I had to start doing the work. So I've been doing the work for 15 years.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
Yeah, but been haunted for
A
for
very
a
long
lot
time.
longer than that, for sure.
Yeah. 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 I mean, you know, the sexual abuse is something that is it's such a tricky thing, man.
Yeah,
It's such a multifaceted monster.
yeah,
You know,
it really
it
is.
it really is, because it affects, obviously, not just your sexual relationships, but it affects every single relationship that you have,
Yeah,
even relationships with strangers, if there's such thing. You know.
yeah. Well, just it changes every it changes every facet of your thinking.
Of your
Everything
being,
is, yeah, of your being. Absolutely.
of your physiology,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every aspect of your being is affected when you are sexually abused,
Agreed.
because you are thrust into a high, everybody is thrust into a highly adrenalized state after those things happen. And it's not just the psychosomatic effects of our thought process and our memories that wreak havoc on our body. It's the actual chemical thrust that's going on inside of our body when these things have happened, and happened long ago. But you said something interesting about the mistakes that were made. You said that just now. And it's
Yeah.
crazy because I tell people this. It's like, they always say, like, a therapist will tell you, oh, the abuse is not your fault. And we're aware of that. We're very aware that it's not our fault. But I think a lot of times what victims think is their fault is the state of their life that came as a result of the abuse.
Yeah.
And that's where we need to forgive ourselves. We say, well, forgive yourself. Yeah, I do forgive myself. I didn't do these things to me. But it dawned on me one day that what I need to forgive myself for is the mess that I consequently made of my life.
Right.
In my 20s, in my 30s. And, it's, those are the things that survivors and victims, quote unquote, need to forgive themselves more. If we're going to talk about forgiveness, that's where that needs to be focused on.
Yeah.
Because I made mincemeat out of my life, especially in my 20s, were just absolutely unbearable. And all of the dreams and aspirations that I had, I couldn't pursue them because all of my energy and all of my thoughts and all of my emotions were directed at just surviving my own mind.
All day, every day.
All day, every day. They say like, live day, take it one day at a time. No. You have to take it one instance at a time.
That's right.
One fraction of a second at a time. That's how debilitating it could be. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the forgiveness, I mean, we're kind of all over the place here, but there's so much to talk about,
Yeah, forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
The F word.
The F word, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not as easy as it sounds because you have to simultaneously balance holding yourself accountable for your actions so you don't repeat them, while simultaneously forgiving yourself because something happened to you that you had no control of, that caused your thought patterns to change, to cause you to make those decisions.
Absolutely.
So you can't tilt one way or the other too far without ramifications, right? If you just forgive yourself to a point where you're like, well, I didn't have any control over it, then there's no accountability. You just keep doing it.
Right.
If you're too hard on yourself and then that takes you, in a completely other direction.
For sure.
So that balance is exhausting.
The balance is exhausting. And ironically, that's one of the most impossible places to find is balance.
Right.
When you're in that particular state. So it's like almost a catch-22.
Yeah.
You need balance to have balance.
Yeah. And it's almost like a seesaw. It's like a pendulum, because we're too hard on ourselves. Then we catch ourselves. We're like, oh, well, we need to forgive ourselves and move into a different state. And we just move back and forth, which causes a cycle, right? So you're triggered, you move into behavior, you complete the behavior, then the shame starts to set in that you allowed yourself to get triggered to move back into whatever behavior it was. And then the shame sets in. Now you're too hard on yourself. And it just, that's the cycle. It just keeps going over and over and over.
Man, it sounds like you have a direct line into my own brain, but I think everybody, but the way you're explaining it, that must be universal, man. That must be a universal concept.
Yeah.
With people.
I think so.
Because I catch myself doing that all the time. I think another thing too is that trauma survivors have a pattern of being hard on themselves, of being overly critical, because we have that critic in our mind, which really isn't our own voice.
That's right.
But I'll be damned if we don't follow it like it's our own voice.
That's right.
I know I've in the past, I followed that voice more stringently than I followed my own true voice.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
it's the ego, and it's designed to protect us,
For
but
sure.
when it becomes when it becomes corrupted, it ends up blocking our intuition, which
For sure.
is what leads to the consistent bad decisions, the consistent, behavior that
Hmm.
cause you to wreak havoc in your own life in the
For sure.
20s, and me to do the same.
And it was just complete and absolute madness.
Yeah.
And thankfully for me, the anger was just out of control. But thankfully for me, I was aware enough to know that, listen, and I tell my clients this, if they ask me, like, what's the one thing you would tell me? I always tell them this. The main component to healing, and I truly believe this, is you have to make sure that you don't make your pain somebody else's pain.
Yeah.
I think that's number one, because we can do yoga and we can meditate and we can go to the therapist and we can do all of that stuff. But as soon as I am taking my pain and I'm transferring it to Bradley, who then transfers it to the guy at the checkout counter, who then transfers it to his wife, who transfers it to her kids.
That's right.
I cannot do that. Now, I do have this in my belief system. I do believe in karma. I do believe that exists. So I like to keep myself a little karmically clean through the process of healing.
Yeah.
I tell people that first and foremost. And so my 20s were spent, the point I'm making is my 20s were spent pretty much in my apartment, making music, but also using that as an excuse of, well, I'm focusing on my craft. When really all it was is I'm insulating myself from the world, from people,
Yeah.
people that I know, people that I don't know. And, the amount of weed that was smoked back in the 90s, I tell you, man, I smoked all of like California. I think I smoked California.
Yeah. Some of the younger people may not realize what a big deal that was. It was, it's not like it is now.
Not like it is now.
There was a huge stigma behind it then.
It was. But
Yeah.
like, honestly, that's what my 20s were, just fighting off.
Yeah.
That rage and shame and ultimately fear. Ultimately the fear. That's really what it was.
Yeah.
The fear that lived in my brain, that lived
Yeah.
in my nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I appreciate you, I appreciate you sharing that.
Have to, man. I have to.
I know, but I know it's not easy.
It's not. It's hard. It's hard as hell. It's the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
Is opening my mouth about it.
Yeah.
And hey,
I understand that too. And my situation was a little different in my 20s. I started my family very young, which was a teenage pregnancy, which is, one of those decisions I was talking about.
How old were you?
When my son was born, I had been 18 for less than 30 days.
Oh, wow. Okay. You were a kid.
Yeah. My wife was younger.
Mhm.
I wish I had the statistics in front of me. I don't. But the statistics of teenage pregnancies with trauma survivors, especially sexual abuse survivors, is remarkable. It's mind-boggling. But so I was one of those people that had decided that my family was going to be different than the family I had grown up with.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up creating a dual lifestyle. So I was this father, this husband, and this father, this perfect family by day, and by night I was still out of control. Like, I was living a rock star lifestyle just because it was chaos. I needed the chaos. That's all I had in my childhood and growing up was just chaos, and I needed the chaos. The stability wasn't working for me. I had to have the chaos to feed the wounds that hadn't healed, and I ended up creating a dual lifestyle. And it really was. So it's amazing the two different paths that you took was shelter and isolation.
Yep.
and mine was to just go as fast and chaotic as completely possible, and just be completely
And
reckless.
they seem like they led us to the same place.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it did.
It's remarkable. It's just remarkable how people deal with things differently.
Differently, man. You know, and it's funny because when I met my wife, who's my wife now, I met her very early. We were 21, so thank God I had her there,
Yeah,
because even with her there, I was close to just,
yeah,
even with her there. So
yeah,
I know if she wasn't there, it would have been over. You know,
yeah. Oh,
it's funny
absolutely.
what universe or God or whatever it is that you believe in, when it puts things in your life, in place in your life, to keep you tethered to the earth. You know,
Yeah.
this
Oh,
thing
yeah.
is going to keep me here. Your son will keep you here.
Yeah.
You know, but then you're forced to deal with who you are. Sometimes we don't even know who the hell we are. I'm still
No,
trying
and
to figure that
sometimes
out too.
we don't know what we want.
That changes
And
every day for me sometimes, Brad.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So my wife and we almost divorced at that 15-year mark. That's what
Mhm.
really set it off. And I thought I wanted something completely different. And now that we decided to keep our marriage, and we actually together started dumping all of our emotional baggage on the table and sorting through what we were going to keep. I was fortunate enough that she recognized she had trauma, and that she was contributing to the relationship being unhealthy.
So she was
Uh,
traumatized. She had some trauma in her life as well, too, huh?
yeah, 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 yeah. But rather than blame me for the breakdown of the marriage, she realized that the things that were happening that she was partly responsible for,
Mhm.
and she took 50% responsibility. We were able to work on that together. I'm very, very lucky that happened, because in most situations it
No,
doesn't happen.
no, it doesn't.
Um, but then we were able to rebuild. And once I began to rebuild and go do the work and start to evolve, I realized that she was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I didn't know that at the time, because I was so lost in the chaos.
For sure, man.
And that the things that I thought I wanted were the things that were only going to hurt me further.
For sure.
That the things that were healing were the things that were right there in front of me.
Hmm.
And I thank God every day that I'm where I am, because the butterfly effect. Any one small decision changes, everything changes, and
Yeah.
I may not be sitting here talking to you.
Let me, if you want to talk about, I don't know if you like, what were some of the things that you thought you wanted? I'm curious.
Just so it, it I thought that our marriage. So my wife is very low maintenance,
Hmm.
and she's very easy to get along with, and I I needed that challenge and that chaos. I needed
I
turmoil,
see.
and
I see what you mean.
I didn't know
You
that's what it
weren't getting
was.
it. Yeah.
I just
You
thought
weren't
it was,
getting the turmoil.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I was like, oh well, it's boring, or whatever the case may
Right.
be,
Right.
not realizing that it wasn't boring, it was healthy.
It's
I just
healthy,
wasn't.
man. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. If we're bouncing pots and pans off of each other's heads, it might not be, you might want
that's
to reevaluate the relationship.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Really.
Um, so that's all it really was.
Mhm.
And I know, and it goes way deeper than that now that I've done the work and coming out of the childhood and the relationships, and there's a lot more to it that I don't want to get into today. But that's
Yeah.
really what it boils down to, from is that I didn't know what healthy looked like. I wanted unhealthy, and I didn't realize that's what it was.
It's funny you said that, man. When I was growing up, a friend of mine had this girlfriend. They were constantly fighting, man, screaming at each, like you can constantly. And then he
Yeah,
would see me and my wife, we're mild mannered. And he'd be like, man,
yeah,
I was like, he's like, is your relationship boring? I was like, first of all, brother, you don't know what we do when we get back to the apartment. So just chill out. Okay. And second of all, I can't see how that is going to last with that girl you're with.
yeah,
Somebody's going to die. And
yeah,
they ended up breaking up, and I've been married for, you know, 18 years. So
yeah, yeah. That's
that in
awesome.
mind. Yeah,
It's
man,
awesome.
for
So
sure.
to answer your question
Yes.
a little bit further,
Yes.
I was because of relationships in my childhood, I was attracted to narcissistic women,
Yeah.
and my wife is completely opposite that.
That's crazy though, because when you say you're attracted to narcissistic women, but you married a woman who wasn't a narcissist.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so
Interesting.
we teenage pregnancy,
Uh-huh.
and I mean, we dated, and
Uh-huh.
you know, we love each other.
For
I don't
sure.
want to dismiss any of that. But we had our son, and we put our family together, and then you know, a few years later, we were actually, I mean, we had started talking about an amicable divorce.
Hmm.
Um, I just thought it wasn't working because it was, you know, it was boring, and like your friend, you know,
Yeah.
and but I realize now that I was looking for that. I didn't. I don't know.
Straight chaos.
My wife, she's
Wanted
just
to
so easy to get along with,
yeah.
you know, and growing up in an environment with people who weren't easy to get along with and
Mhm.
needed constant
Back and forth.
constant gratification and
Mhm.
constant reassurance or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be, um, you know, that's the behavior pattern I was in. So that's what I thought a relationship should look like.
And, you know,
Farthest thing from the truth.
relationships too. I mean, they go through seasons, man. You know,
Yeah.
it's not summer all the time.
No. 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 No.
It's
No.
not.
Which is the other thing. I
It's
mean,
not.
that's
It's
a
not going
great
to be like that.
no.
So anybody who's listening out there, if you're kind of in a relationship and you're going through a downtime, God, just reevaluate it and say like, do I love this person? And if you do, yes, and stay with them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what are you going to go out here on like Match.com or like Tinder or whatever? I don't like. Come on, if you got something good, hold on to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, and my wife and I talk about that all the time. That we're blessed because in a lot of ways, but one of the things that I realized, and we she agrees with me. We talk about it is that everyone's broken.
Everybody, man.
And so if you are with someone, and not saying that people shouldn't separate or people get divorced, I would never say that. With
Mhm.
there are always extenuating circumstances. There's always, you know, get whatever. But I'm
Mhm.
just saying, on as a general rule, if you separated from one person and got together with another one, that person still has baggage,
Absolutely.
and that's why I think you get people who end up being have serial relationships because they're not willing to do the work, and the grass always looks greener, so we keep hopping the fence.
Hmm.
At
Hmm.
some point, to have a fulfilling relationship, whether it's your first wife or your third wife, at some point the two of you have to do some work to get beyond whatever's triggering
Absolutely.
ending the other relationships.
Absolutely.
And for us, we were like we already have children, we have all this history, we don't want to just throw it out, so we might as well try to make this work with each other.
For
and
sure,
and,
man.
and I'm grateful.
And you know, I don't want to be the 46-year-old guy at the bar, you know,
Yeah.
with a drink and my shirt button down here. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be that guy. So,
Yeah.
you know, hold fast to what you have.
That's
Make
right.
it work. You know, I got all my gold chains on at the bar. You know, no, we're not doing that, man.
Yeah, you're on dating app with a picture from 10 years ago.
Yeah, from 1978. Oh man, no. I
Yeah.
don't even want to know what it's like out there these days to do that. I'll
Yeah.
work through whatever problems me and my wife have. We'll work through them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
So it sounds like that you've been able to experience the same thing that I've been able to experience. My wife and I, we are best friends,
Yeah.
and I never thought it could be this way. I never did, and we talk about things that I know most married people probably don't ever talk about, and it's extremely rewarding, especially if one of us is having a bad day,
Hmm.
and we realize it, or we don't realize it, and the other one realizes it, and
Hmm.
can initiate the conversation without, you know, some kind of a blow up or reaction or
For sure.
feeling slighted or being judged or that kind of thing.
Hmm.
You experience that with your wife as
Definitely. You know, it's she I'm more of the type I want to talk about everything, and my wife is more of an introverted person.
same here?
Yeah. So she would think that sometimes I was being overly emotional. And then she would think that, and I would think sometimes that she's being, you know, cut off and closed off. But then we realized as time went on, it's like we are dealing with the same things internally. We're just choosing a different vehicle externally to express that.
Yeah,
But I don't think that I could have my relationship with my wife would have lasted if she, in fact, didn't have some extremely traumatic experiences growing up because when I was dropping the ball in the relationship, she understood why. You know, she knew me, and she knew why.
Yeah.
So she wasn't a harsh critic on me. She knew what I had to come back from.
Yeah.
So it was important that and I think a lot of times you will find traumatized people gravitating towards each other in some way.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Even when they don't even know that about each other.
Yeah.
Something
Probably most of the time they don't know that about
don't
each
even know it. You know, this is something energetic, something in the way they move, the way they live. This is, the other person
Yeah.
can pick that up.